What's good? It's Woog. 2023 has been a year for boxing that has featured some of the most important fights of the modern era. We've had Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia. We had Devin Haney versus Vasily Lomachenko. We recently had Josh Taylor versus Teofimo Lopez. And just days before the most important fight of them all, Errol Spence Jr. versus Terrence Crawford, we're going to get an amazing Super-Bantamweight matchup. And that'll be Stephen Fulton, 21 wins and 0 losses, defending his WBC and WBO Super-Bantamweight titles. That's 122 against the monster Naoya Inoue. 24 wins and 0 losses. And by the way, with Naoya Inoue, 21 out of those 24 wins have come via knockout. So this is an amazing matchup, and I'm super glad and very impressed by both of these fighters that they are willing to make this fight. Okay, so you've got Stephen Fulton, who's a unified champion in the division with his wins over Angelo Leo and then Brandon Figueroa. He captured the WBO belt and then the WBC belt in a very close fight that really could have gone either way between he and Brandon Figueroa. And then you've got Naoya Inoue, who was first a junior flyweight champion. Think about how small that is. He was the WBC light flyweight champion in only his 6th professional fight. And then he became a WBO junior bantamweight champ. That's 115. So he retained that WBO belt for a few fights, and then he went up to 118 bantamweight and conquered that division, becoming the undisputed champion at 118. So instead of resting on his laurels and basically just hanging his hat on those Hall of Fame accomplishments, he now goes up to 122 super bantamweight, and in his first fight, he's gonna take on the unified undefeated champion, Stephen Fulton. I mean, come on, hats off to both of these guys, because this is high risk, high stakes with potentially very high reward. Now, most people have Naoya Inoue like in their top 3, top 5. Some will have him as the #1 pound for pound fighter in the sport. I think I had him at number 5. And the only reason I didn't have him higher is because his best win, you could argue, was against an aging, still very, very good, but an aging Nonito Donaire. And what would his next best win be? Maybe against either Jason Maloney or perhaps Emmanuel Rodriguez. That fight, by the way, that stoppage over Emmanuel Rodriguez, aging very well for Nonito Donaire, given how good Emmanuel Rodriguez seems to be. But it's basically, it's a relatively non-elite strength of schedule for Nonito Donaire to this point. Otherwise, I would have him higher than number 5 pound for pound. But if he's able to pull this off and defeat Stephen Fulton, then it's almost undeniable that he is at least top 3 pound for pound in the sport. So let's talk about Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue. Now, I'm gonna likely see this build as Naoya Inoue versus Stephen Fulton, because it's Naoya Inoue who kind of has the A-side star power in this fight. But because it's Stephen Fulton who in this case is defending both of his belts in this particular division, I am going to list this as Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue, and I think that the official flyer has this as Fulton versus Inoue. So Stephen Fulton, he was relatively unknown just about 3 to 4 years ago, so it's not like he's got this long accomplished career. He is a relative newcomer. In fact, it's Naoya Inoue who's got the deeper experience between these two guys. Again, Naoya Inoue is the 3-division champion here. But after, pretty impressive wins against, mid-tier fighters like Isaac Avalar, that's Canelito Isaac Avalar, and Arnold K. Guy, Stephen Fulton then stepped up after the COVID 2020 inactivity in boxing. He then returned to the ring January 2021, and he fought Angelo Leo for the WBO Super Bantamweight title, and he beat Leo by a few rounds. Very impressive performance by Stephen Fulton. That's the fight that pretty much put him on the map, and it was his fight after that against Brandon Figueroa, who has since gone up now to 126 featherweight, and he just beat Mark Magsayo there. So Stephen Fulton fights Brandon Figueroa, and this becomes a battle of attrition where Brandon Figueroa, has this kind of, he puts opponents on what I like to call the treadmill from hell, where it's just an onslaught of activity. And given Brandon Figueroa's relatively tall height for that division, he tends to just kind of drape over his opponents and rain down with nonstop activity. Think, Antonio Margarito. I mean, we've seen some of these guys who just have a relentless pace. Brandon Figueroa is one of those guys, and Stephen Fulton basically hung with him in that style of fight, where he was rolling with a lot of his punches and he was distributing a ton of punches as well. Brandon Figueroa is also one of these guys who has an insanely good chin, and Stephen Fulton was awarded a majority decision win over Brandon Figueroa in that fight. Many thought that Figueroa deserved the victory, but I don't think most people have a problem with Stephen Fulton earning that decision win. Again, very close fight with a lot of back and forth. But the stylistic matchup that Brandon Figueroa imposed on Stephen Fulton, where Stephen Fulton kind of had to oblige and fight that style of fight, it's almost irrelevant to what that might mean for Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue. Now, Fulton did have one more fight after that Brandon Figueroa fight, and that was against former belt holder Danny Roman. And this was in June of 2022. This ended up being Danny Roman's final professional fight. Stephen Fulton pretty much won via wide decision against Danny Roman. But as good as those last 3 wins have been for Stephen Fulton, Angelo Leo, Brandon Figueroa, Danny Roman, there isn't a guy on that schedule, on that resume, that is anything like Naoya Inoue. And then conversely, you could argue that Naoya Inoue hasn't fought anybody like Stephen Fulton. I would think that the closest might be Emmanuel Rodriguez, but no, stylistically, they are pretty different as well. Not to say that Stephen Fulton is necessarily better than Nonito Donaire, who Naoya Inoue has beaten twice. First, via decision in what I consider to be the 2019 Fight of the Year. Excellent fight. And then he beat him again 3 years later, June of 2022, knocked him out in the second round. He dropped him early, finished him shortly thereafter. It was one of those where you set your alarm if you're on the West Coast of the United States like me, because this fight was in Japan, and occurs midweek. Like, I think it was on a Tuesday. Set the alarm for 3:30 to watch, the rematch between the monster Inoue versus Nonito Donaire. And then that happens. It's like, whew. Well, damn. Do I go back to sleep? I still have some time to spare between now and work. But it was a very different story in that rematch against Donaire versus what the monster encountered in the first fight versus Nonito Donaire, where they were basically at boxing range, just throwing absolute lasers. It was a chess match, but you saw what made each one of those fighters tick. You see the kind of off-time power punches that Inoue throws. You see Nonito Donaire's trap setting and him kind of lulling people to collapse the pocket so then he could, mid-exchange, let one of those vicious left hooks go. But the problems that Donaire presented for Inoue, I don't think are the same problems that Stephen Fulton presents. Like, Naoya Inoue is not going to have to worry about any one particular shot detaching him from his senses in the way that you have to worry about Nonito Donaire. Even though it is Stephen Fulton who's going to be the bigger of these two fighters, it's Naoya Inoue who packs the insane punch here. And Nonito Donaire, even though he's a smaller fighter than Stephen Fulton, at least through most of his career. I mean, Nonito Donaire also, participated at 122, did very well there, and even fought up at 126. But it's Nonito Donaire who's got a bigger punch per punch than Stephen Fulton. But if we're sizing up Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue, which, by the way, I'm not even going to really mention too much about that Paul Butler fight. That's Naoya Inoue's most recent fight, and that's the one that allowed him to become the undisputed bantamweight champion. But Paul Butler was moving away from Naoya Inoue like that entire fight, where he just wasn't engaging in a way where Naoya Inoue could fight his style of fight. Now, there is something to be said about Paul Butler going 11 rounds and then getting stopped via TKO in the 11th, but him making it that far against Inoue, because, again, if we're sizing up Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue, I wasn't going to talk too much about the Paul Butler fight, but now that I think about it, there is a little bit of relevance, just very little, in that if you are moving away from Naoya Inoue and you are not basically coming in on him in the way that, say, Jason Maloney did or Emmanuel Rodriguez did, to where he could see you coming in and then time you with a vicious right hand, a very fast and accurate, extremely powerful right hand, then he's going to have to come on his front foot and do some hunting. Now, Stephen Fulton doesn't move away from opponents all that much. He can in spots, but if you are engaging him, he will also skillfully engage you. But the problem with engaging Naoya Inoue is you are always one punch away from getting badly hurt. And, you know, online boxing analyst Richard Dwyer pointed out that there is no wind up to Inoue's power punches. Like, he's able to throw an extraordinarily powerful punch while looking like he's throwing something like if you try to just flick your hand out as fast as you can, don't sit on it, don't try to put anything behind it, but just try to get your hand out there as quickly as you can. That is about how fast Naoya Inoue is able to throw absolute power punches. Whereas you see some guys, like, they will throw their body into their power shots. Not with Naoya Inoue. He throws it like it's an arm punch, but it just carries extraordinary explosiveness and weight behind it. I don't know how he's able to do it. It's got to have something to do with his legs and his balance. But Stephen Fulton, he's a distance, keep you at range type of fighter. And again, it's almost irrelevant that Brandon Figueroa was able to drape over Stephen Fulton and make him fight a phone booth style fight. Because Naoya Inoue isn't the style of fighter that wants to do that. He wants to fight you at arm's length, and he's going to look for his opportunities to kind of sort of lull you to sleep a little bit, where he's doing a little bit of one thing, kind of establishing a pattern, and then he will break with his own pattern and just light you on fire with a fast right hand, a fast left hook, just something that you did not see and did not expect him to throw in that particular moment. So while these guys are fighting at range, it's going to be interesting to see, one, if Stephen Fulton's going to be able to establish range and kind of keep him at the end of a jab, and to hit Inoue hard enough where he's giving Inoue something to think about. Like, I believe you have to earn Inoue's respect. Like Nonito Donaire, like, he gave Inoue something to think about. I mean, he broke his orbital in that first fight, cut him very badly as well. He wobbled Inoue later on in the fight. Look at that 9th round in the first Inoue versus Donaire fight. Look at that might be the worst I've seen Inoue get rocked. And it was, yes, by a beautiful right hand. It wasn't even the left hook that did it. Now, he did hit Inoue with some left hooks in that fight, but the one that really hurt him was a straight right hand. And, I think that Nonito Donaire throws with more laser-like intentions than Stephen Fulton, like in terms of being able to be at range and then bow, just something that you didn't see, came out of nowhere and just changed the course of the fight. I feel like Nonito Donaire has that ability a little bit more than Stephen Fulton. Stephen Fulton will give you a steady diet of punches, but it's not in the same way where any one particular punch is going to change the tenor of the fight. So while Fulton and Inoue are at range, and Stephen Fulton is trying to exercise his height advantage, it's going to be like almost 5'7" for Stephen Fulton against the 5'5" Inoue. So it's a 1.5 to 2 inch height advantage for Fulton. It's going to be like a 3-inch reach advantage for Stephen Fulton. And Stephen Fulton, again, is a technician. So I think that it is possible that he's going to be winning some of these rounds with his skilled boxing and is going to be able to hit Naoya Inoue, frustrate him, hit him from distance, find times to step in, hold, maybe impose some physicality on Inoue. Inoue, as powerful of a puncher as he is, I don't see him being an extremely physical fighter where you are using your shoulders, your weight, and just kind of weighing on the other guy, moving him around and things like that. I don't see Inoue doing a ton of that. He's kind of a clean pocket style fighter where he's looking for some space to operate. Stephen Fulton also looks for space to operate. It's just that some of his recent opponents have kind of taken away that option and kind of forced him to fight a different style of fight. So I'm just very curious to see what style of fight breaks out. Is it going to be Stephen Fulton on his back foot, trying to avoid confrontation and trying to stick and move against Inoue? Or is Stephen Fulton going to be bold enough to try to back Inoue up in spots? I feel like he's got to do some of both. I don't think it's good. He's going to have success just sticking and moving away from him. I think that he's going to have to stand his ground in certain spots and even, again, start backing Inoue up in order to have sustained success. Like you could have that stick and move style and make it work for you for like the first 3 to 4 rounds, but you're eventually going to be a little bit less able to move and a little bit less sharp to where that swim without getting wet type of thing isn't going to work for you in the middle and late rounds in the way that it did in the early rounds where you were at your freshest. So again, Stephen Fulton, I think, is going to have to stand his ground in certain points, but I just feel like as good as Stephen Fulton is and as durable as he is, again, look at that fight against Brandon Figueroa. Brandon Figueroa tends to take people's heart out of the fight and tends to overwhelm opponents. Again, he's doing it now at 126. So Stephen Fulton is going to be a big fighter by Inoue standards, but I feel like, and Stephen Fulton has a very good chin, but it's Russian roulette the more you start engaging in these exchanges. And I just wonder if it's going to be a case where Stephen Fulton, while he might be having success, I mean, I could see Stephen Fulton being up on the scorecards through 6 rounds, like 4 rounds to 2 for Stephen Fulton. I could see him having that level of success. I just feel like in the middle or late rounds, he's going to kind of move into a Naoya Inoue right hand, or it could be one of those where Inoue lulls him to sleep and it's just one of those, okay, jab, and it's kind of like a low tempo moment and then boom, hit you with the right hand and then that changes the fight. I tend to envision something like that happening in the middle rounds. The question is, can Stephen Fulton then recover and start fighting his fight again? Does this fight go the 12-round distance? Or is somebody going to get stopped here? Now, it's hard for me to envision Stephen Fulton stopping the monster Naoya Inoue. I mean, if he does, it's going to be hard to deny Stephen Fulton top 5, top 8 pound for pound consideration. And again, if Naoya Inoue beats Fulton, top 3, just given where Naoya Inoue already is in these pound for pound rankings. Stephen Fulton is just on the outside of most people's top 10, somewhere maybe between 12 and 15, something like that. But he will undoubtedly be a top 10, probably top 8 if he beats Inoue, in a similar way that, you know, Dimitri Bivol entered most people's top 10 after beating Canelo, even though it was Canelo coming up in weight to challenge Dimitri Bivol. But it's just hard to see or to envision Stephen Fulton fighting, 36 minutes against the monster, having to be somewhat high volume, because I do think he's going to have to be somewhat high volume in order to win rounds against Inoue. I just think that that's a tough proposition to do that without getting blasted, absolutely blasted at some point. So I kind of think that this is either going to be Stephen Fulton via decision or Naoya Inoue via stoppage, something like a TKO. It's really hard to count Stephen Fulton out given what we've seen in terms of his durability. It's just that, Figueroa style is nothing like Inoue. And again, thankfully in some ways that Naoya Inoue isn't the type to just drape over you and make you throw close to 100 punches around. I think that the first 4 rounds of this Fulton versus Inoue fight is going to tell us so much, because if Stephen Fulton can establish that he is as good, if not maybe slightly better a technician, and he could stop Inoue from being able to let his power punches go with the accuracy that he normally has, because again, Naoya Inoue, extremely accurate puncher. Again, with his heaviest artillery, he's very accurate. It's possible that this could, by the 4th round, 5th round, it could look like Stephen Fulton might be on his way to a decision win. I'm going Naoya Inoue via late stoppage. I just think that at some point it's going to be a competitive fight through 6, maybe even 7 or 8 rounds. And then in one of these exchanges where, you know, Stephen Fulton might have already gotten slightly hurt in a couple different spots, but I could just see them both coming together at the same time, letting their respective right hands go, and Inoue get off a little bit first and then cause Stephen Fulton to buckle and then stop him perhaps shortly after that. Now, if Stephen Fulton recovers, we could be headed into a scorecard where it's anybody's guess, because maybe Stephen Fulton looked like he might have pulled off a decision but got dropped somewhere in the process. That's also very possible, but I'm gonna go with the monster pulling off a late, I'm thinking maybe 9th or 10th round TKO win over Stephen Cool Boy Steph Fulton. This was a tough one for me. I was really back and forth in a few moments, but yeah, I'm taking the monster in this one. Please let me know who you have winning Stephen Fulton versus Naoya Inoue in the comments. I can't wait for this one. And keep in mind, this is going to be on Tuesday, the 25th. So, you know, set your alarms early. Be ready to watch a early weekday fight. For me, this is absolutely can't miss. But no, it's not taking place on a Saturday, not even taking place on a Friday. This is going to be on Tuesday, the 25th. But yeah, let me know what you think is going to play out between Fulton and Inoue, and what will the ramifications be for each fighter depending on how this one unfolds. Like, where does each guy go from here, and what does this do to each fighter's legacy? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.